Yep.
All right. Well, we can just edit this part out. But anyway, so when we talk about the value of art, when you think about art, you probably think about paintings, drawings, sculptures, but do we ever really think about like the actual importance of art and how art plays a role in our everyday lives? From something as simple as looking at something that is nice on the eyes to something deeper, such as like freedom or expressing yourself. Art has always been a way for people and for groups of people to have a voice. And the question here is how is art like worth having? Is the funding for art through the government worth it? As quoted in a quote by Cynthia Freeland, she's a professor of philosophy at the University of Houston. She always said, as an art lover, will argue that art brings beauty to our surroundings and provides occasions for intellectual and emotional reflection. But those who don't appreciate art see it as unnecessary and frivolous at any rate. Certainly not something that tax dollars should go to support. So we're just gonna dive into some arguments as to why or why not we should keep public funding for art. So I personally feel that we should keep funding for the NEA, which is basically the National Endowment for the Arts, which gives money to arts. So one reason why we should keep it is that the arts are good for the economy, and the NEA contributes $129 million toward public art per year.
So $129 million sounds like a lot of money. Couldn't that money be going to something else?
Yes, but the government spends $3.8 trillion annually, and NEA only accounts for a fraction of a percentage of that.
All right, so what do I say next?
Yeah, we just cut this part. Say, like...
What a fraction of that.
Like, weren't you going to say how, like, if a fraction of 129 million... You're going to say something with, like, it being split up or something.
Oh, yeah, okay. So you said a fraction of that.
And then, like, we need to start... Like, my next point is going to, like, what you're going to say next, and I'd be like, so what about the young aspiring artists that need funds to start their career?
Okay. Hold on, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to say this. So... Okay. So if we're talking about $129 million split up amongst a couple thousand art institutes,
Here, just restart. No, like, talk about... Remember you were going to talk about, like, the Metropolitan
Yeah, I know, but, like,
Opera?
I gotta, get into that real quick. Okay, so out of this $129 million, it all gets split up pretty thinly, like, throughout most of the art institutes that the NEA donates to. For instance, in 1996, the Metropolitan Opera of New York received $390,000 from the endowment, a federal subsidy that totals only 0.29% of the opera's annual income of $133 million and amounts to less than the ticket revenue for one single sold-out performance at the venue. So, I mean, this really isn't contributing that much to these big institutes, so I don't really see the point in that, really.
What about the young aspiring artists that need funds to start their career, though?
Okay, hold on. We need to... Hold on. What about this part?
Public interest.
Like, it'll drive, like, the big industry no matter what.
Oh.
What about this part?
I should say this part?
Yeah.
I thought you didn't
No,
know
that's
this
your part.
Okay, so... Here, just say that part. Oh, actually, never mind. I'll just be like... well, the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, they said that the creative industries generated $729.6 billion in economic activity, and it accounted for 4.2% of our nation's GDP.
Don't say the trade part. Okay, and then, Okay, I mean, going back to my previous point, all those numbers sound pretty big, and considering that the NEA only contributes $129 million, which is a fraction of what we spend annually, it's real like. God damn it!
Did you forget what you were gonna say?
Yeah. Well, I knew I was gonna say. Okay, hold on. So these numbers, God, fuck, dude, I can't do this.
So fucking hard, dude.
Okay, so how did you end that last one?
I said that the U.S. Bureau of Economic.
Oh yeah. Okay, so these numbers sound pretty big, and considering that we only use $129 million a year, which you just stated was kind of a fraction of what we spend annually, I think that the public interest will still drive this industry no matter what. For example, nearly all of the major orchestras in the United States existed before 1965 and will continue to exist after the NEA subsidies are ended. So, I don't think that this money is really making that much of a difference in the big scheme of things in the art industry.
So, since you're saying that it's not going to make a difference in the major things, so what about the young aspiring artists that need funds to start their career?
Okay, so, I mean, the government doesn't fund entrepreneurship just because young aspiring entrepreneurs don't have the resources they might need to start a business when they're just starting out. They're forced to make do with what they have and create their own worth in this world. As a support to that, a McGill University management professor by the name of Reuven Brenner declared, "The NEA's opponents have it right. Bureaucratic culture is not genuine culture. It was the unsubsidized writers, painters, and musicians imprisoned in their homes, if they were lucky, in asylums or in gulags, if they weren't, who created lasting culture." So.
You're saying that you're talking about entrepreneurship. The art industry is different than entrepreneurship because entrepreneurship is money driven and our community is passion based. So wouldn't you say that public funding is needed to keep the spirit because there's no money?
And then what do we say?
And then be like,
I'm gonna say.
shit, I think you said the quote in the wrong order. You're supposed to say it there.
Oh,
that
fuck.
quote.
Okay, shit, where are we then?
So like you're talking about here. Let's just redo that part. So I'll be like, so what about the young aspiring artists that need funds to start up their career? And you'll be like, well,
Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna
talk
say
about
this.
only the entrepreneurship, and then I'll
Okay.
say that point, and then you'll say that other point, like.
Okay, so
Okay, so what about the young aspiring artists that need funds to start up their career?
Okay, so for instance, the government doesn't fund entrepreneurship just because young aspiring entrepreneurs don't have the funds or resources they need when they're just starting out. They're pretty much just forced to make do with what they have and prove their own worth.
So the art industry is different than the entrepreneurship industry because the entrepreneurship industry is money driven, and the art industry and the community's always been passion based. So wouldn't you say that we need public funding to keep that spirit alive because there's going to be no money without the government funding that?
I don't necessarily agree with that because I think you can express your feelings with whatever resource you have, no matter how expensive. Like, you need money to keep going in entrepreneurship, so I understand why we don't fund that, but in art, like, you don't necessarily need to, like, keep producing to keep going. You can just create out of whatever you have, and all right, we're gonna cut this out, but
Yeah, say that next thing about how like the artists, like say the McGill University, like the NEA opponents have it
Okay.
right, like bureaucratic culture.
okay. And to support this, a quote from McGill University management professor by the name of Reuven Brenner states that the NEA's opponents have it right. Bureaucratic culture is not genuine culture. It was the unsubsidized writers, painters, and musicians that created lasting culture.
Wow. That's actually a very interesting point. So maybe it is best that we don't have funds for the arts because clearly, from the facts that you brought up, the moral aspect of art outweighs the positive revenue that's made from the NEA, and the creativity of individuals is more important than the money that is made. And like as we talked about earlier about the importance of art, the creativity of art needs to be preserved, and
Yeah, and if you're not good enough at art to make a living at it, you can still do it as a hobby. It's not like nobody's stopping you. But like obviously public interest is gonna drive what art like you're not just gonna magically become popular because you love to create art, like you're gonna like people are gonna have to love what you do and understand what you do
yeah.
to get it anyways. So I mean you can create your own thing for your own personal what's the word I'm looking for? Alright, you can create your own art for your own personal interest if you want. So, yeah.
So all in all, as we argued both sides, we came to the conclusion that funding for the NEA should not be in place because the NEA, although it contributes $129 million to the NEA and there is a profit, it's not more important than the individuality of the individual artists. And
it's not as important as like the moral aspect of art. So like if the NEA keeps funding art, it's kind of discouraging creativity. If you're getting paid to do something for somebody, it's going to be kind of under their jurisdiction and you aren't going to really have the freedom to create what you want to create. And there's also a bunch of other problems with like the NEA transferring funds into like friendly hands or like for one instance they donated a bunch of money to this mayor so he could just like do whatever he kind of wanted to do with his city, and it ended up a lot of citizens in the city were unhappy with some of the artistic choices that he made, and it kind of just defeats the whole purpose of it. So I think we should quit funding for public arts because it just goes against all the rules of art. And Jay, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was well put, and I completely agree with that. And other than that, thanks for watching our video.
Yeah, bye guys.